Everybody is on and listening. Welcome to our stream. Signing in just after the screening of episode 3 of the Book of Boba Fett. Quite the roller coaster ride. A few gut punches, a few real feats. Lots of small details to talk about. Glad to have yous in the audience listening to us talk about it. If you enjoyed it, we're here on Hoth, as you can see, at the Republic base. In the background is our shield generator. And on Hoth, we're going to run through some heroics. We're going to probably encounter a few Gaborians, might free a few Ortolans, and run around in the close on the whole. Should we get started just to warm things up?
Yep, sure.
Who would you like to head to first?
Let's go to the top, beta droids.
So you're going to top. I've got one left over from last week, I think. Let me just clear that up when we drop down so we can keep track of things better.
Yep.
That is Tatooine over there. So tonight's episode 3 by Jon Favreau and directed by Robert Rodriguez again. Only a little bit in the way of flashbacks, a whole lot in the way of current timeline detail. Introducing new characters, introducing aspects that we saw in the teaser trailers. To this one requires a little bit of concentration. Did you pick one up back there?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'll get the data back.
It's here.
Okay. And so why don't you start by laying out some of the basic timelines that we saw there.
Okay, so this episode was called The Streets of Mos Espa, and that's where a lot of the action took place. We start with a opening sort of establishing shot of Tatooine, and then we see the Bioma monk droid walking outside in front of Jabba's palace. They were one of my sort of little favorite action figures that came out, sort of a slightly obscure character, sort of seen in the shadows in Jabba's palace when 3PO arrives at the start of Return of the Jedi.
Interesting that they're still present, this, because assuming they're sticking with the backstory that it was that Jabba's palace was a monastery that he took over the basic structure of. And they continue to basically ignore him, just go about their monastic business in the background. So if there's the lore we're sticking with, it's super interesting to see them still inhabiting the region in that way.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. It gave us a clearer sort of view of them.
Clearly it's a CG model, but outside and well lit. See that there.
So from there we move to a scene where once again Boba and Fennec are by the throne, and the 8D8 droid is giving them a sort of a back history of what happened. He talks about sort of Jabba and his sail barge.
The 3 main gangs.
So he has a big holo map which is being projected by an astromech, and they're basically discussing the history after Jabba's death and how Bib Fortuna took over, and that certain areas of Mos Espa were sort of divided by gangs. I managed to write down Trandoshan and Aqualish. I didn't quite catch the third one. Off the top of my head, I'll have to watch that scene again. But so the gangs had separate territory within Mos Espa. So while we are in that scene, a person from the city comes in to visit, to speak with Boba Fett, and
a moisture trader.
Yeah, a broker for the as he says, the vapor farmers, moisture evaporators. So anybody that is familiar with his work will have recognised this actor as Stephen Root. He has done a lot of comedy roles, a lot of things. He was in Dodgeball and just a whole lot of things. So that was really fun to see him show up. So he came in to visit Boba in the throne room. He is pleading with Boba Fett to do something about a gang that is stealing water from him, and says that he'll pay sort of double the tribute to Boba if he can sort of deal with the issue. So we get a shot of Boba and Fennec walking down Mos Espa streets at night, and he finds the gang and approaches them. They are a young gang. They are sort of cyborgs.
They are cyborgs,
Yeah, so they all have some sort of
yeah,
they all have mechanical upgrades and things like that. So we see there's a young female at the front that has a mechanical arm. We see a number of the men with eyes that are sort of robotic in nature.
Yeah.
And they basically say that that Boba Fett is saying that they live in the workers area. Why aren't they working? And they say that there is no work, and that he basically invites them to work for him because obviously he's in need of a little muscle with the tensions going on, and they complain that they're being way overcharged, basically a month's money for the water, and then
so the moisture breaker's not being entirely honest.
Sorry, I got some spawning behind me.
Okay.
And he comes up and notices Boba Fett is talking to the gang and complains that he needs his money back, that they owe 1,300 credits, and Boba gives him 500 to basically accept, settle, and go away. So we assume that is what he chooses to do, because he gives him the threat to he can take it to Mos Eisley, and we get the feeling that moving from Mos Espa to Mos Eisley is considered a step down. That is a bit more of a smaller, grungier city, perhaps more risky. Old Ben refers it to Old Ben certainly refers it to a hive of scum and villainy, and yes, we see a lot of gang and criminal activity on Mos Espa, but at least there's some attempt at order here, with it being sort of the headquarters city of the daimyo, in this case it's Boba Fett. So the gang gets on their very shiny speeder bikes and follows Boba Fett. It's sort of evening time outside old Jabba's palace, now Boba Fett's palace, and we see a frog dog outside that grabs two creatures that happen to be in the vicinity, very much like that's shot outside Jabba's palace in the original trilogy. So that was fun. I thought it was a frog dog in that other episode where something kind of gets captured in the Tusken village, so that was kind of fun to see them a little bit more clearly in that shot. And once we've got that outside establishing shot, it's nighttime, we go to Boba Fett once again in his Bacta tank. I wasn't sure if we would get a flashback scene in this one, but he goes... we see him sort of going back to that dream of Kamino when he is young. It's very, very similar to the shot from the previous episode. I'd have to look at them side by side to see if there is like longer. Slightly longer or different angles.
I think it's leading up. I think it's just slightly longer, leading up to something a little more significant. I don't know. So I'd expect that they revisit that.
Yeah.
And gives a little bit more explanation as to why that departure of January
is significant. Yeah. So after that shot, we see again in flashback Boba Fett in his black Tusken robes riding a bantha across the dunes. We see him traveling for a while. He reaches the town of Mos Eisley, and as he's sort of riding his bantha into town, we see a few things scattered around the streets. We see some Jawas. We see a man putting a stormtrooper helmet on what appears to be the last spike in the row of stormtrooper helmets. Now, if you've watched The Mandalorian, tiny spoiler here, but we see those helmets on the spikes in an episode of Mandalorian.
Framing the point of continuity, essentially letting us know that this is a point prior to when Din Djarin visits Mos Eisley.
Yeah. And I think it made an interesting point because we haven't seen Boba Fett interact with society as much. We don't know how much of world events he has, learned with his time with the Tuskens. So that might be just sort of hinting that he's getting some idea that the Empire has either been kicked out or defeated from Tatooine, because obviously.
And also, just as a side note, also if this is set just at that sort of point in time, that is prior to Din Djarin's first encounter with Fennec Shand. So there's a small chance we will see an expansion of that encounter.
Yeah, they've certainly set the precedent for continuing to tell some of his story in sort of flashback form. So
any other flashback in the background, walking past in the Mos Eisley streets.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I was just going to jump to another one.
Okay, what's it?
Gamorrean Menace.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So also just behind those Stormtrooper helmets on spikes, it's a little bit of a blink and you miss it moment, but we see someone walking in the background followed by 3 pit droids. Now this does resemble very strongly Peli Motto, the character that we first meet in The Mandalorian when he lands on Tatooine and needs somebody to kind of work on his ship and stuff like that, and they end up looking after Grogu.
Mos Eisley spaceport.
Yeah. So that was kind of fun. I don't think they were credited in the credits.
No, she wasn't.
But it was just sort of a really sort of in the background moment, which I thought was kind of fun. Little nods that this is getting closer, that these flashbacks are getting closer to the events of The Mandalorian.
I think it really is just hammering home how tightly these are interwoven in terms of character paths, whether or not they cross paths or not. The events that they're experiencing are definitely overlapping.
Yeah. So Boba Fett finds some Jawas, asks them where the Pikes sort of do business, because he's obviously got some questions to ask, some dealings, so he has a discussion with what appears to be sort of a leader within the Pikes, and he's sort of explaining that he wants payment, because they traveled through the Dune Seas and stuff like that, and he wants to sort of establish the ongoing relationship, and they said that they have already paid for protection to the, he calls it the Kintan Striders. So
yeah.
I saw...
Now that's interesting.
Continue.
Because, the Kintan Striders, the sweet Viking that was seen, and where, obviously that's fairly a reasonable presumption as where it turns out, but some eagle-eyed people on the internet have deciphered the graffiti on the street bikes and deciphered the graffiti that they paint when they plunder a homestead or such like. So the symbol that they write that is actually a letter K in Huttese, which is the first letter of Kintan Striders, and it's also been pointed out that one of the swoop bikes has the skeleton of a Kintan Strider, which is a Deseret chest piece painted on it. And Kintan Striders share a homeworld with Nikto, which is the predominant species of the gang. So that all ties together. The fact that the swoop bikes are Kintan Striders, and someone's really dug deep in terms of filling in all that background detail and make sure it all makes some kind of interesting sense.
Yeah. So after that, he basically assures the Pike leader that he'll deal with, as he called them, the Nikto Sand Riders, I think it was. And said they won't hear from them again. So the implication is that he's going to leave and basically threaten or do something else to make sure that the Niktos back off. We see him leave Mos Eisley on his bantha, and as he's heading back out into the Dune Sea, he sees smoke on the horizon, and obviously smoke in the middle of a desert is a bad sign. So he gets off his bantha and goes to investigate, and then we see the absolutely tragic side of his beloved Tusken clan, and it looks like it has been attacked and burnt.
Yeah, so this is a real gut punch, and the whole and this is only about 10 minutes in, I don't think. So it really paints this episode as quite a roller coaster. It's a big event in Boba Fett's journey, obviously, and goes a long way to explain why he is interested in cleaning up Tatooine in many ways, not just laying the law for the sake of personal gain, but a bit of motivation for achieving some degree of order that benefits the Tuskens in particular. The gangs that are operating without oversight. And that includes the Pikes and the Content Striders. So major gut punch. You go ahead.
Do you need some more?
I am. Yeah, I need to.
You need some more?
Yep.
Okay.
I've just got this beam after 10. Yeah, that was huge.
We see specifically, it's not. We see the tents burnt, and then of course to make sure that the audience is fully aware, we see the bodies of the chieftain and a lot of other Tuskens lying on the ground, presumably dead. I have to go back and watch to see if specifically if they show the bodies, but later on when he is performing this sort of funeral pyre to give them their sort of farewell, we see him play specifically the distinctive chieftain gaffy stick on the fire. We see another gaffy stick, which I assume that might...
We
assume that it may imply the warrior, but I have to go back and see whether that character was specifically shown or not.
I was looking closely at the head wraps for one that was predominantly black, and I don't think I saw one.
Yeah, like I didn't, but then I was also taking notes, so I wasn't sure if I just glanced down and missed something.
I was looking quite hard for that because I thought it was a very deliberate play.
Yes. Yes.
Distinguishing what they were showing us and what they were not showing us.
I would certainly love for that character to have made an escape and show up somewhere else. But in a very poignant moment, Boba Fett gets this small wooden stick out from his robes and puts that one on the fire. And so I assume that because it is an sort of crafted gaffy stick, that is meant to imply that the young Tusken who he sort of befriended has been slain, which is quite a really sad moment. Not that they were together, we don't know how long that they were together, and obviously he wasn't exactly a father role, but he was very connected to this tribe, so it's a really sad scene.
I mean, it is, and it's intended to make the audience feel that way, whether or not there's any elements to reach us. It remains to be seen.
Yeah.
I will get my hopes up that significant characters, if we did a head count, so to speak. So that was the first downward drop in the roller coaster.
Yeah.
But I think fortunately they moved on. Was it pretty fast? There was a lot happening this episode. They moved on fast.
Well, because
so we didn't have to dwell on that.
The very next thing is Boba Fett being awoken from his dream by an attack by the giant Wookiee. So that was really quite a dramatic moment. One of those things where, we're getting yanked back into the present time, because if we think back to the conversation with the twins in the previous episode, they warned Boba to sleep lightly, and here we are seeing him being attacked. Well, not necessarily kind of sleeping in his bed, but certainly resting/sleeping in his Bacta tank. Yeah. So this is a really interesting battle scene.
So he was totally caught off guard. It was contest, obviously, and despite putting up a decent fight, it's just, I mean, he's outweighed literally, about 3-1, if not more, just in terms of muscle pop, and so his attack is pretty futile. He gets a few good hits in, and he gets a few good gaffy stick hits in. I think at one point his gaffy stick is actually embedded in Stanton's shoulder.
Mm-hmm. We saw. We see
he's going nowhere fast.
Yeah.
Grim.
Yeah, we see that the Wookiees obviously come prepared. We see an interesting weapon. He's got like what appears to be a knuckle duster that has some sort of electro effect on it that looks fairly brutal. I think that does make contact. And he kind of manages to get his arms around Boba Fett, lift him off the ground, and is kind of doing that sort of crush grasp around him, and we're not quite sure how Boba Fett is going to get out of this one. And then the young woman from the gang comes running in with kind of like a electro shiv, sort of a hidden knife, and comes in and attacks the Wookiee. And so Boba Fett gets dropped, and the rest of the gang comes in to kind of help balance it out a little bit here.
So an array of weapons. The weapons are kind of cool. I'm still not 100% sold on how I feel about the gang and the sort of aesthetics of the gang and speeder bikes.
I've been thinking about it. I feel like they're trying to show them as like a new generation. Like a lot of people on Tatooine have grown up, they're kind of weathered, and these ones look like they're trying to be a bit like that kind of the teenage wanting to flex, wanting to have an iPhone and a nice car. So I feel like there's an element of that. We know that because they've got electronics embedded in them, they spend any money that they have on technology. On gearing up both themselves and their speeders, because if you are a young person, a drifter, doing whatever you can to survive, your speeder or your mode of transport is basically going to be your lifeline. So I can kind of get it there. We haven't visited all the planets in Star Wars. I appreciate that there's going to be aesthetics and designs that are different from what we have seen before.
We're trying to move away from monolithic civilizations where everybody looks the same, and that whole kind of 70s vibe where everyone in the future or in outer space or whatever wears the same costume.
Yeah, and I feel like because Tatooine feels so familiar to what we've seen in other movies, that this was sort of like a point of difference, something a little bit new, and that we may see connections where they might have gotten their tech or their speeders and stuff like that down the line. I think they're kind of interesting. Yeah. Okay. Invisible foes.
Yeah. But the game's interesting. It's got 2 named actors in the main credits.
Yes.
Sophie Thatcher and Gordon Bolger. Sophie's the female lead, obviously, and Jordan is the guy with the cybernetic eye that talks to him later by public eye communicator.
Yeah.
So those are both named characters. So you see them more stuff later.
So the scene plays out. They come. The scene plays out where so the gang has come into the room, and then the Gamorreans show up, and obviously the Gamorreans are a bit of a threat. They're a physical, sort of muscular force. So the Wookiee tackles them. They roll down the stairs, making their way down to the throne room, where I believe it's Fennec pulls the lever to drop him into the Rancor pit. Now we know from the earlier episode that there is no Rancor in the pit, but you might not know that. And he's gripping onto the edge, and we see that moment from one of the trailers where Fennec basically pulls like a little dart, a little sort of flinging stabby knife out of the sort of the base of her blaster, and hits the Wookiee in kind of the knuckles in the back of his hand. He is obviously gonna feel a lot of pain from that, and he drops his grip and falls down into the pit. So he is essentially trapped. There's nothing's gonna happen to him there. And then that's where that kind of scene wraps up. They have sort of vanquished the foe. Are you coming this way? Which way is it? I'm getting turned around. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. So the next scene is a really fun, sort of banquet scene, where it's just Boba Fett and Fennec with a very long, very heavily laden banquet table, Obviously enjoying some of the perks of being the daimyo with all their sort of tribute money. We see some an interesting sort of meat animal sort of presented like
Butchered,
a pig with some sort of thing in its mouth and all sorts of funny fruit and stuff like that. So it looks really fun. I'm sure I'll have a lot of fun looking at all the fine detail in that scene later. And they're talking about strategy.
Yeah, and there's a cool R5 instrument.
Yeah, he tells them like no more food, go in like I think it's something like patrol the perimeter or something like
join
that.
the patrols.
So
it's the same instrument that had the hollow projection.
It's a darker color astromech. So he's obviously got a certain number of droids helping him alongside, and then I think it was 88 that announces that the twins have arrived. And so I was kind of not expecting them to show up again so soon. I thought they might be sort of a lingering threat, but as this following scene plays out, perhaps that might not be the case. So the twins arrive, and we're not really quite sure why, but they basically apologize.
Because they failed.
Yes. They know it's a clever play. So they apologize for sending an assassin to try and kill Boba. And so
they're going to get off-world.
Yeah, that they're just like, nah, this is like the Tatooine's not worth conflict. It's worthless to them. They'd rather sort of focus on their own territory. So they'll talk about, we're gonna leave, and they say that they have brought a gift, and then lo and behold, do we see a very cool sort of sleeping Rancor being brought up the hill. Yes. So there's a very cool Rancor sort of sleeping or sort of subdued on a big sled, but the fun little bonus here is that the sort of Rancor keeper, as it were, accompanying the Rancor is none other than Danny Trejo, who has been in a lot of things.
And he's worked with Bob Lucas a lot, and a number of things, well, a lot of things. And this was a Rodriguez directed episode. So I thought it might just be a cameo at that point, that he is literally just a visiting Rancor keeper.
Yeah, because he doesn't really speak in that scene. I thought maybe they're just kind of giving him like a featured extra role here. Because obviously, I'd have to look it up. I'm not familiar if Robert Rodriguez did any of the Machete films, where obviously Danny Trejo plays the main character of Machete. But yeah, they've certainly worked together a lot. So that's kind of fun. We're seeing that a lot, and we know from his past history that he is one of those directors that likes to work with people that he's worked with before and vibes with. So that's fun. I like the sort of the cameos in films and TV, and traditionally Star Wars doesn't do a lot of that. We saw it obviously with Mando a little bit more, seeing some people that we know from a few other things.
It's in part because of the people involved. They are just people that tend to do that, and as I say, I think it's not going to surprise me if Tim Morrison ends up doing a lot of work for Robert Rodriguez down the line. But,
I think it's also particularly because this is an episodic TV show, so you can have an extra come in and do just like a scene or two. And they tend to film this in California, so it's not like a big travel expense. They're not going to a location or something like that to do a scene.
Just hit on another point of trivia. Danny Trejo and Robert Rodriguez have worked together on a lot of different things. One that they did do is the 2010 Theatre Tours movie that was written by Robert Rodriguez. Actually, the guy, we talked about this in these podcasts, just yesterday actually, the guy who plays Backus Santon, Predator, played the Predator in that with Robert Rodriguez having co-written it and Danny Trejo starring.
Yes.
So we actually had that scene, Backus Santon and Danny Trejo in that same scene with twins on the litter being delivered. So there's quite a lot of overlap there. Yeah, and also talking the podcast that jokingly said it would be fun if they filled the Rancor pit with a new Rancor, and
Yeah.
lo and behold, one turns up today.
Yeah. So just before we get onto that one, the Hutts say they're going back to their territory, and they bring out the Wookiee to sort of,
Yep.
I don't know, I guess maybe sort of figure out like, okay, you sent this guy, what are we going to do with him? And the Hutts surprisingly kind of give him to them, saying, oh, you can sell him if you want. Yeah. And we see Boba Fett release him, and there's kind of like a look of uncertainty before he goes running off into the distance. He kind of growls at them, but it's not subtitled or anything. Wookiee speak generally isn't, but I would assume that the characters around them might know what he said. And that's interesting because there has certainly been, as we might have mentioned earlier.
Was it at that point when Boba Fett actually just made reference to it being just business?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Because he kind of growls at it like...
He's definitely not killing just out of vengeance or anger or for the sake of killing. There's all self-defense. He hasn't got any specific reason to kill him at this point, so he lets him go.
You certainly think, like, as a bounty hunter, you don't want to make more enemies than you absolutely necessarily have to, because you don't want to be watching your own back when you're trying to stalk and hunt other people. So that kind of makes sense, you know. Do what it takes to achieve the job, but you know, you don't need to go around just killing people needlessly unless you're getting paid to do it. And there isn't a particular monetary or strategic advantage to just killing the Wookiee. Obviously, there's a risk that he might be bitter and try and come back, but obviously Boba Fett thinks he's in the sort of position that unless somebody else would pay him, he doesn't think that he'd just do it out of vengeance, especially if he lets him go.
But, so, I mean, historically, Rebecca sentence famously a little bit unstable, if not psychotic, but in this instance, he knows he's for the reason either. But I think historically, in the pre-A New Hope era, both Black Ascendant and Boba Fett did work technically for Jabba at the same time.
Yeah.
They did make an appearance in the comics.
Yep.
The comics maybe simultaneously, so they do have a deeper history, and I think get into him being let go at this point or whatever.
Let's go do Signal Jam.
Signal Jam, sure.
Yep.
But a lot going. I mean, that's why I thought of this episode as quite a roller coaster. The slaughter of the Tuskens was a serious gut punch.
Yes.
Before we even had time to catch our breath from that, we had some fun cameos, serious cool encounter with Black Santa, delivery of a Rancor, and a lot of plot progression with sort of, in some ways, just discarding the Hutt's plot red, putting that to the side for now.
Don't know if that's kind of like whether they're just trying to throw him off or whether they're going to sort of go back and talk to some people and kind of amass a bigger threat, because obviously Boba wasn't terribly threatened by their arrival in the previous episode, so maybe they're like, okay, we're going to need a bit more muscle on this one. But the gift of a Rancor does kind of make me think that maybe that is
I think the
like
Hutts
they were being truthful here.
Yeah, well, they said before it's not good for business. I think they have to straight up being pragmatic. It's not in their best interest to waste resources that they know they're not going to win. So we move on from that to the Rancor pit scene, don't we?
Yep.
And,
So
Danny Trejo, unnamed character from Danny Trejo, the Rancor keeper. Talked quite a lot. A lot of discussion about this being a young Rancor, very young Rancor.
That was sort of, I think he said that it was basically bred in captivity.
Yeah.
To sort of, to be raised for this kind of purpose. So
he decides he wants to ride it.
So it's mentioned that it seems to be unrestrained, and Boba asks, why is it just lying on the ground? And Danny says that they are emotionally complex creatures and it's depressed, which I think is kind of cute, really. And he said that he will train
cute.
it.
It's cute thinking about rancors like that, and that's thinking about Danny Trejo thinking about rancors.
Yeah. So Boba notices that it has blinkers over its eyes, and Danny's character explains that is because they imprint on the first person that they see. So obviously what we see here is that I think it's Danny's character that mentions the Witches of Dathomir riding rancors, and Boba says that he's ridden something like large creatures and things like that. Obviously, if we think back to the holiday special, we have seen him riding a large creature.
That's what it was. He said he's ridden beasts 10 times that size.
Yeah, so he wants to learn to ride it, and so we see the blinkers being taken off, and the Rancor kind of focusing its vision for the first time on Boba Fett. So we see this kind of bonding moment where it's looking on its sort of owner, its keeper, for the first time. So I'm really hoping we see a lot more of this Rancor. I hope they don't do something tragic and end its storyline too early, because I want to see a lot more of this Rancor. They better not pull a Tuscan tribe on us.
Everyone keeps pointing out that he's not turning up on a litter, so I reckon for effect he's killing Rancor.
Yes. Oh yes, I need to see that.
No, sorry, I just chose to get these guys up here.
Oh, okay. All good. So just as he's doing that, AD8 kind of does that comical, like 3PO kind of sticking his head around the corner and interrupting the scene to tell them that the mayor doesn't have like a date, a sort of a schedule opening to meet with him for like a month. And this obviously upsets Boba Fett, because he feels like people should make time for him because he is important. So he leaves the Rancor pit and tells AD8 to tell Fennec to gear up, because they are going to go confront the mayor.
Yep. And he specifically tells Danny Trejo, go get a Ronto carcass from the large. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, which is fun. So we see them. We see them walking down that same street leading to the mayor's building. This time he is followed by that young sort of cyborg gang. I hope we have a name for them, or whether they're just sort of like Boba's crew. And so they go inside to the sort of the foyer. We see that same sort of Greaser character that we saw in an earlier episode, and the Major Domo was there as well. That is sort of acting a little bit flustered, trying to put him off. And he says that he'll go see what he can do about, getting the mayor to see Boba, but Fennec notices that he locks the door behind himself. So they're like, okay, he's trying to run. This isn't up. So they bust through the door and discover that no one is in that room.
Yep. And the Major Domo's trying to escape.
Yeah. So they kind of run through a back or side entrance, I didn't quite see, and they see that the Major Domo is driving away in a speeder. Now the speeder kind of obviously was designed to resemble Luke's classic Tatooine land speeder, just with sort of like straight sort of additions down the sides a little bit. I feel like if you pulled those bits off, it would have that very curved front shape in its entirety. So I thought that was a sort of a fun, like a further generation, slight variation on Luke's speeder. And so obviously this is where the gang is really going to come and be useful, because they all come with speeders. At this point we haven't seen Boba use transport. We assume that the speeders did not survive the train heist, and we haven't really seen him use.
Nah, they all got trashed.
So we've only seen him use a bantha at this point. So it's pretty useful that now he's got a gang with their own speeder bikes.
Yeah. So the big chase ensues with lots of damage and debris, which was okay. I guess it didn't have to be high speed. It didn't make sense to be high speed with all the right angle corners and so forth. But just before we get into that, you said you wish you had a name for the gang.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call them the Mods for two reasons. This is a bit of a dad joke because they're clearly based on the speeder riding mods of the sort of British mods and rockers of the 60s.
Yes,
and
they have
modified.
Yes, very cool. So there's some really cool sequences, or sort of very classic street vendor. We see food getting knocked over, we see droids getting knocked around or having to dodge out of the way and stuff like that. A lot of shots from the trailers that we would assume were from a speeder chase of some sort, but now we know where that fits into the context of the story.
The two citizens and the rickshaw.
I don't know if rickshaw is the right word, but it's either identical or very, very similar to the droid that takes Padme and Anakin to Watto's new place in episode 2.
Yeah.
Where he's kind of got like a wheeled base and is carrying this kind of carriage with 2 Bith in it, which is kind of fun. I like that reference. Both prequel and original trilogy there. And we see I think it was kind of towards the end of the speeder chase, he knocks into a whole lot of fruit that I have to have a look and see if it's a recognizable one. I know the reference of Maluran's fruit always jumps into my brain, but I've kind of forgotten what they look like specifically, so I'm going to have to go and look and see if that's a specific fruit or just a random exotic spiky fruit just for the sake of let's make it not look like apples or something. But yes, so the Major Domo, now that he's basically been stopped, says that the mayor is working with the Pikes. And we see a shot that was seen in the trailer of the very big starship coming in, flying over Mos Espa, and then an extended shot where we see it land, and then a whole lot of Pikes come walking out. And they have one of the members of the gang that has the large eye modification uses a sort of a public terminal to talk to Boba, and Fennec is there, and they're basically like, there's a lot of Pikes, it looks like they are preparing to go to war, and Boba says something like they'll be ready for it, and that's where it leaves off.
Yeah, it's definitely Maluran.
Oh, you did look it up? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know that a lot of the Rebels episodes occur in Lothal, and I don't know how much, I assume that you don't grow too much fruit on Tatooine, so I would assume they would be imported from somewhere. So that makes sense. So that's fun. I know that if they have the opportunity to put in a little reference that fans will love, it looks like they are taking all of those opportunities. So that's really quite fun. I love the internet sleuthing that goes on, people trying to put the puzzle pieces together. So yeah, that's the end of my notes. Just sort of recapping all the moments and stuff like that. But yeah, a few sort of like, I know that it's I guess the Tuskens feels like the loss of the Razor Crest, one of those, big dramatic sort of character defining moments for the one involved.
Impact. I think it's the loss of quite a few friends and community, so it's bigger in some ways.
Well, see, because I think what I'm kind of getting a vibe from the flashback scenes of Boba is that he spends time alone, and we kind of get, possibly it reads more like this because of the Bad Batch, that Boba must feel a lot like Omega, and that they are different to the rest of the clones. So they don't have a brothership, a kinship. They feel very alone, very separate to the rest of the people. They don't really grow up with brothers and sisters or a family of some sort, because they're kind of separate. And so when Omega meets the Bad Batch, she really bonds hard to them because they're basically the only family she has. And I feel like for Boba, the only family he had was with Jango, and he lost him at a very young age. So he has bonded pretty hard with the Tuskens. So I feel like just the undertones in some of those flashback scenes has really driven home the way he will deal with that loss. And obviously it's something that still kind of haunts him, the fact that he is still dreaming about it. You know, remembering back to that time, it was obviously a significant turning point. We didn't see him actually, like he was going to go obviously talk to the Nikto swoop gang, but we don't actually see them in this episode. So I feel like he's still got some revenge to lay here. And just one note I forgot to write is that we did, if it was left unclear, we did see that Nikto gang graffiti mark the Huttese K painted on one of the half-burnt Tusken tents.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
So it does make it very clear to him and to the audience who did this. They were sending a message. And I think that particular scene really spoke back to the conversation that the chieftain was having with Boba in the previous episode, that they were basically trying to stay hidden, that it was not their idea to attack the train, that it was Boba's. So we feel like this is a smaller, much more sort of isolated clan that does not do the sort of the raids that we know some of the other clans do with Shmi Skywalker and the likes, that they weren't particularly looking for trouble, but unfortunately in an attempt to protect their clan from the likes of the Pikes, that they made a deadly enemy elsewhere. And I do hope that perhaps one or more of them survived, but I'm not holding my breath there. I'll have to see.
Well, there's a lot of unexpected things popping. And we're at 5 out of 6. Let's do one more. We just wrapped up the conversation.
Let's go defeat Frostclaw.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, even though we knew back then he was going to show up, that appearance was dramatic and sudden. The way they used the huts in that episode, I think, was a bit unexpected as well. So, I'm not trying to predict much in terms of, maybe hoping for what may or may not show up, but just about anything, despite our wishes or speculations about anything could happen at this point. Throwing some real curveballs and sudden turns into the mix.
What were some of your favourite moments from this episode?
I thought the drama of Black Ascendant's sudden appearance was pretty cool, and I knew the only way out of it, well, not the only way out of it, but the lucky way out of it was if that's my concern out, because that they had us back in other episodes. But I thought it's interesting that he's starting to accrue, because the place feels quite empty still, whereas back in Jabba's day it was packed with
full of denizens,
revelers, but also
slaves,
and muscle.
staff, all sorts.
So I think it's kind of fun that he's starting to build his base in that regard. Enjoyed seeing that. I liked going to Mos Eisley and distinguishing between Mos Espa and Mos Eisley. Both in terms of just appearance and a little bit of a presumption about just federal differences in business and opportunity between the two townships, villages. Rancor, as soon as I saw it, the thought did cross my mind as just keeping it in the pit to drop people in is not the only opportunity here. I thought just did cross my mind that he could ride this before he ended up formally saying it. So I kind of look forward to that. I think.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to drop something like that and not fulfill in this season.
I think we'll see it in a really, that's a scene that will play out well from a low angle to really just make him look like a Beastmaster and a Crime Lord all wrapped up in one.
Yeah. I wonder if there might be a touch of, I do wonder if we're going to see any other Tusken tribes. Like whether he's going to use his, not heritage as such, but his connection with one Tusken tribe to perhaps try and unite others against a common goal or a common enemy. And certainly turning up on a Rancor would be sort of like a... not to say it's copying, but it would feel like the moment in Avatar, the James Cameron film, where he rides the giant flying creature as a way to unite the tribes. Sort of the legendary creature that is supposed to sort of signify strength and leadership. Don't specifically know if Rancors are terribly common on Tatooine, whether it was seen as a flex to own one in captivity on Tatooine for Jabba, or just basically they're just a big chompy animal and every self-respecting crime lord would own one. So it'll be interesting to see if it's sort of played for impressions, or whether he can ride one while it attacks people or eats people.
I'm trying to think, apart from on Dathomir in the Clone Wars, we haven't seen more than one in the same place at the same time, have we?
Not that I'm really familiar with. I haven't...
Okay.
Yeah, have to do a bit of research on that one. But yes, I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of it, especially since we're getting a bit of personality, and also the fact that we hear that they are sort of they bond well with the people that look after them, as opposed to being just sort of a mindless, vicious creature, and the fact that they're emotionally complex gives a bit more of a sad, emotional part to the Rancor Keeper in Return of the Jedi, that seems to be mourning the loss of his beloved Rancor when Luke squishes it with the door.
Yeah, well, along very similar lines. Everything was seen about, I know I was saying that there's variation between Tusken tribes, but everything was seen about Tuskens in this series really paints Anakin's interactions with them in a different light.
Yeah. Yes, everything that we're sort of seeing here feels like it's really trying to add on and connect the dots that we have seen from Tatooine and other sort of references and things in a way that sort of really fleshes out the sort of world building and stories and things like that. I liked, it was always that kind of slightly comedic, slightly sad moment in, Return of the Jedi, where the Rancor Keeper is mourning it, and you're like, well, yes, zookeepers do become fond of animals, but not necessarily the ones that you can't cuddle, the ones that are a bit too bitey to sort of really spend time that close to, but sort of understanding that within the right context they are, very bonded, devoted creatures kind of fleshes that out, and I really enjoy that.
Finish what we need to do on Hoth and work of the scenes in the Book of Boba Fett. So we're probably going to wrap things up around about and go and rewatch it. It's second watch on the same evening as a tradition. And lets us just see a lot more detail.
I don't think that there was anything else that I kind of missed. Like, I was furiously trying to write notes and watch at the same time. But yeah, overall, I think, and I enjoyed the episode. I feel like I I think so far, not to pick favorites, but I think the second episode is my favorite so far.
Probably a lot of people would.
But I know that each successive episode is telling pieces of the story, and we don't necessarily appreciate all the pieces of the puzzle till we see it all complete. I think there'll be a lot of moments in each episode that we will fully appreciate more when we get and watch the final episode. It's sort of like one of those. I know that a lot of us have gone back and watched The Mandalorian when we see all these sort of bits and pieces as we get to know these characters more, understand things in the storyline and the sort of the back history and things like that. That's kind of give us a little bit more of a deeper appreciation for the storylines and the scenes and things like that. So I feel like we're not halfway through the season yet. I know it's an odd number, so next episode will be just over the halfway mark. So I feel like this is gearing up. We're obviously going to have some sort of big conflict. We have yet to seen the Trandoshan sort of banquet meeting scene. So we know that something like that, they are one of the sort of the leading gangs factions that 8D8 mentioned as sort of dividing up Mos Espa. So we know that they have had some level of control since Bib Fortuna took power. So it'll be interesting to see, the dialogue from that scene, what the outcome from that scene is, what Boba and his friends are gathering to fight against. It sounds like, I think, if I recall, have to go and watch it again, that the Hutts made reference, or I don't know if it was somebody else, that somebody else has laid claim to... it was the Pikes, wasn't it? So we don't know if the Pikes are going to be the big bad, or something else is going to happen here. Certainly they have proven themselves to be a formidable opponent. We know that they trade in spice, probably among many other things. So we assume that they have a level of wealth. We see the leadership dressed very nicely, so I'd assume that they have a certain amount of credits at their disposal. I really appreciate the fun cameos. I think they're sort of keeping it up a notch with those sort of fun... we don't know whether we will see that moisture evaporator broker again, or whether that was just a sort of a little fun moment there. I do hope, because he is the Rancor trainer and he mentions about working with Boba to trade him, to ride it and stuff like that. So I'm hoping we do see him on ongoing episodes. I think that he would be a really fun addition. I love his costume. I definitely want to see some better photos. It appears as if he's got sort of like a Rancor head on the medallion on the front of his chest. I think that that's quite neat. I think that's what it looked like. Once again, you're trying to sort of watch it and look at the details and everything like that, and I think that's what that was on his chest. But he's definitely got a sort of a gritty look, somebody that looks like he works with big beasts that are, you've got to have sort of an edge to you to work with dangerous animals like Rancors and have a kinship with them. So he's very, very cool. I hope we get a character name. I don't think it's ever said in this episode. I might be wrong. And because he was listed in kind of the main first list of actors, we didn't get a character name for him. So I hope that's revealed. I hope we get like a character poster or something like that might reveal his name. Or at least perhaps it will be said in a later episode, so we get that. Another one to add to my action figure wish list. And a note that I said that I thought about when the bonding scene with Boba Fett, I thought this is the point where HasLab should have announced their Rancor backing project, because I think the timing was wrong. They should, yes, the Rancor was crafted after the one scene in Return of the Jedi, but I think this Rancor is going to make people kind of fond of the creature if they weren't before. I think it's going to have a bit more of a role. We're going to see a bit more personality, perhaps a bit more action. Obviously, we know that they're quite capable of eating Gamorreans and any other sort of creature that's served up to them. But I'm really hoping we get some really cool scenes with this Rancor, some impressive scenes, but also some sort of cute bonding training moments, like in the season of The Mandalorian where you see Din Djarin learning to ride the blurgs. Obviously, the blurgs aren't quite as menacing. They do have fairly big teeth. But they do have a bit of a nasty frog kind of appearance to them, we know that rancors are very terrifying and scary, especially when they are full grown. So I'm wondering whether we'll get a little bit of a montage like that. And also akin to the Tuskens learning about the speeder bikes, this show has shown that it's good at using those slightly comedic moments to sort of pepper in between the sort of serious action scenes and the gang tensions and things like that. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, unfortunately we now have to wait another week to see how things progress. But I know we watched last week's episode at least 3 times, if not 4 times, didn't we? So we'll fill the time between now and next week by rewatching this a good handful of times.
Yeah.
Alrighty, we'll sign off now, pack these guys, and catch you all next week. Thanks for signing in. Appreciate those that have jumped into the audience, whether you're on Twitter or just looking in the background. It's cool to go and run through all that detail.
Yeah. It kind of really helps the details settle in to really talk about it and reflect on the scenes, the things that you like and things, little moments that stood out to you. So it's definitely fun sharing and just talking about it here just straight after watching it. So thanks for joining us, and may the Force be with you.
See you later.
Bye. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like. Check out our other videos and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.